Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many people here. It's an honor to be here. Everybody says that, but it truly is an honor to be here to talk to you and to be able to just share the ideas of the Department of Defense, like, you know, what we're thinking, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. I want to thank the GEOINT Symposium 2022 and the GEOINT Foundation. Robert, thank you so very much. Rhonda, thank you so very much for your support. Really appreciate all that you have continued to do for our nation through your service, if you will. So I know that I am literally all that stands between you and being able to go do lunch. I was going to read my remarks. I had a 3,000-word presentation I was going to do. I asked my wife what she thought about that, and she said, I wouldn't listen to you speak 1,000 words. I'm like, okay. So with that, I said, why don't I just get a couple of bullets and just kind of walk through, talk to where we are today. And what I'll do is just give you the Department of Defense's perspective of it. I'll give you my perspective on it, drawing on my 40 years of experience. And I hope you are able to take something away from it that's very helpful. It's hard to follow Paul Nakasone and all the other speakers who have come before us, but it's my honor to do so. One thing before I get started, Admiral Sharp, are you here today? I would be remiss as the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security if I did not ask everyone to give a round of applause to Vice Admiral Sharp. Bob is as dedicated of an individual that I've ever worked with. He's just collaborative. He's got the right personality, and we're going to miss him. We know that you're not going to go far. You're going to be a part of this symposium, I'm sure, for decades to come, but also a part of the apparatus that continues to help us. So thank you for your service on behalf of the Secretary of Defense and the entire department. Tanya, welcome to you, ma'am. Okay, next slide. So when I talk about the importance of GEOINT, one of the things I like to do is put it in the context of why the Secretary of Defense says he has three major priorities. And those priorities are, we're going to defend the nation, we are going to take care of people, and we are going to succeed through teamwork. Those are the three priorities, okay? And when I look at GEOINT and the importance of GEOINT, it basically nests right under what the Secretary of Defense has said. And so when you look at what we do in the department to ensure that we have a robust GEOINT infrastructure and enterprise, we are trying to defend the nation and meet the changing dynamic threat needs that are out there, or threat challenges that are out there. So that's number one. Number two, we're providing that intelligence that is enabling us to defend lives. So when we talk about protecting people, that's where we get into that persistent threat stare that we are able to get from GEOINT, and we're able to accelerate that and get it in the hands of policymakers. And number three, we reinforce that imperative that the only way we're going to do this is to work with the private sector, to work with our international partners, to work with academia and others. So, next slide. I'd like to talk about the synergistic nature of Intel, and I have an example here that I'd like to use. Some of you may know this example, but I'll just kind of walk the group through it and what we have here. So as you look at the left side of the chart, you see various ends that we have. You have the SIGINT system that I was blessed to be a part of for a number of years. You have the human system that I was blessed to be a part of, and then you have the big DoD. And what you may have is an indicator or a tip from one of those other ends that says that something is occurring someplace, or there is something of interest that is happening in some place. So you look at those things, and then you push that into the broader IC, if you will, and then you start to just kind of cogitate on what's there, what do we have. And so we have something that says there may be something at some place at some time. But the only way that we can really get confirmation of that is if we have a robust GEOINT enterprise that is enabled to move over and actually tell us what is there and if that is of interest to us. So if you look at the top of the slide, you'll see this white compound. So I'll take you back to May 2011. The place is Pakistan. And look to the bottom right now, and what you'll see is the compound is in a city called Abbottabad, Pakistan. Some of you know the story very well. That is where Osama bin Laden was, right? So that's where we found Osama bin Laden. We had tips that said that there was something there. Those were really relevant tips. We fed those into the system. We had other ints go and take a look at it. But then we brought in the GEOINT system that enabled us to actually see the compound and to get patterns of life and to notice that there were things happening there that were unusual. We also fed that back into the other ends, so the other ends could actually start their cycles and continue their cycles to say, what do you have? And so we got more HUMINT there, we developed more SIGINT there, and lo and behold, our special forces were able to go and move on that objective on May the 1st, May the 2nd, 2011. That's occurring today in a lot of different spaces, and it has continued to occur in Ukraine. So all those things are very important to us, and this is how it works. And it must work this way. We must have that queuing, we must have that tipping. We must ensure that we work with one another if we are to be as effective as we need to be. Next slide. Next slide, okay. What is the role of INS? So intelligence and security. So when we talk about the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, we added security a few years ago because security is just as important as intel. If we don't do the security piece right, we're going to be vulnerable to our pacing challenges and to other threats, whether they be insider or threats that we're facing all the time. So my role with my team is to help lead the integration of defense intelligence across the entire security enterprise. People think about us as, of course, NGA, NSA, General Nakasone, the NRO, and DIA. But we also have the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, too. So we have added that as a key component, and they are foundational to helping us do all the things that we do. So we integrate those together. We work not just within our own organization with the IC, but we also work with partners and allies, as I said already, across the U.S. government, across academia, the private sector, of course, with you. We work with our international partners. They are a key and a growing key to what we're doing foundationally and around the world. We could not do our business without them. We optimize so we can give what we call this decisive information and decision advantage to the Department of Defense leadership and to our national leaders. So when I took on the job, Secretary Austin asked me, he said, Ron, what's going to be your top 4 priorities? He said, I want all my undersecretaries to give us what their top 4 priorities are. I'll just give you mine. I'll do it very quickly. Number 1 was, or is, to provide a decisive information and decision advantage to our policymakers. So I want them to be able to get out in front of the adversary, to know what the adversary is planning, what they're thinking, and how they are going to move against either an ally or against the United States. Remember, it's all about defending the nation. Number 2, my priority was, or is, operationalize partnerships and relationships. Operationalize. So we do a lot of drinking, we do a lot of eating with partners. What I want to do is be able to pick up the phone and say, I need your help at this time and at this place. And we had done this during this administration, whether it be Afghanistan and now Ukraine. And we are never going to go back from that. We are doing it, and Admiral Sharp can talk about this. I think, Bob, you may have used the words that there is no turning back. We have operationalized ourselves in such a way, and we are shared intelligence in such a way that there is no turning back. But we also need to be able to do that with you. I know that we are supposed to have this contractual relationship with industry. It's not kind of the relationship that I'd like to have. I like to have a genuine partnership where I can come to you and say, I have a challenge, I have a need, and you can say, I think we can develop a solution, and then we can iterate on that constantly. Not me throw something over the transom and have you say, I got it, we'll see what we can build at some time, if you will. So we want to have those operationalized partnerships and relationships. Number 3, I need to upgun security and CI across the organization. And because of the adversaries that we're facing, you need to do that too. You're an integral part of what we do, and we know that, but our adversaries know that. I guarantee you our adversaries are monitoring this conference. They're monitoring everything that we say. They're monitoring who's here. They know your companies. They know your supply chains. They're going to come after you. They're already after you, but they're going to come after you even more. So we have to, all of us, enhance what we're doing in security and CI. And then my 4th priority was really to look at people. Right? How do I attract and retain the workforce of the future? General Nakasone talked about that, and there's not much more I can say, but I'll add the term diverse. workforce, talented workforce. Diversity for me is a mission imperative, and I may hit that again before I get off the stage here. But that diverse workforce is really what we're going to need to move forward in the future. So those were my priorities, and that allows us to really get to the smart investments that we need to make and that we want to make. The DoD does not have an infinite amount of resources, but we do have enough, we believe, to make some smart investments. And many of the companies that I was able to see just walking through the exhibition floor, great things are being done. And I'd like to meet all of you eventually, but just great things are already being done. So those are going to be our things that really we're going to focus on in INS. Next slide. So how is GEOINT making a difference in the Ukraine? So I've been in the business a number of years. I'd like to say that I've served every president since Jimmy Carter, which means that's a long time, right? A really long time, but I have in some capacity in the government, starting as a linguist and then retiring as a director of ops at NSA. But in all my time of being in this business, I have never seen a more comprehensive picture that has provided more insightful, actionable, end-to-end intelligence as what we have had on the Ukraine. We have understood for quite some time, I won't go into specific details, but for quite some time, what the Russians were actually planning, how they were going to execute it. We saw the deployments. We saw their decision signals. We saw their desire to put out false flag operations so they'd have some impetus to go across the border, and we disclosed it. I say we, but that decision was not taken lightly, and I would say to you, and a discussion for another time, that decision was made by the Commander-in-Chief. A gutsy decision to say we are going to disclose some of the most sensitive intelligence that we have, but it's important enough for us to do. And that gets to the fact that it has worked. I think it has helped turn the tide. But this has been a case study for us, and it really is one that's going to really pave the way for the future, and we're going to need you as we have relied on you in Ukraine. We have delivered this intelligence to our partners and to our allies, and it really is turning the tide. The Russians are having a tough time in the Ukraine, tougher than any of us ever thought that they would. But the Ukrainians are taking the fight to them, and it's because of work that you're doing right now, things that you are delivering to us on a daily basis. And we're synergizing that with all the other things that we have in such a way that it really is giving our leaders this decision advantage. And we are using that, if you will, to counter anything that the Russians continue to throw at us. We're facilitating that humanitarian aid, and we're just letting people know what's really happening in the Ukraine. So this is a case study. I had the honor to talk to the ambassador. She's in this picture with me, Makarova. And she, that day, of course, she's on the phone with President Zelensky several times a day, but conveyed her thanks and appreciation to the entire intelligence community, not just the Defense Intelligence Enterprise and everybody who's made a difference here. So we are making a difference, and thank you for what you're doing. Next slide. So what are we driving towards? This is really the key for us is, where do we want to get and what are we trying to do? So how do we actually take the information that we're delivering and deliver it in a way that it is secure, it's reliable, and it's resilient? We know that our adversaries, that our challenges that we're facing are actually trying to undermine everything that we do. They are actually trying to get into our decision space, they're trying to get into our systems, our processes, and to corrupt those things. So we have to operate at scale, at speed, but we have to do it securely, reliably, and resiliently. That's number one for us. How do we do this? How do we continue to do this? Number two, we have to look at AI, ML, I know you've heard a lot about it. You heard about Maven and all that Maven is providing to the Department of Defense. I think you heard about the transfer of Maven to NGA. We're setting the conditions for that right now. We're also working with Congress to make sure that they are satisfied, and of course working throughout the department. But AI is making a big difference already. It really is. It's delivering things that the warfighter is just astounded by, and it's really helping them to understand what's in their space, not just in the Ukraine. Last week, we had a leadership meeting at the Pentagon where a number of 4-stars, really all the combatant commanders came back. All the undersecretaries and secretaries were there. We got together and we talked about a number of things. One of the 4-stars came up to me and said, sir, Maven's really helping us. It's really making a difference. But we need to do more than Maven, right? We need to look at other capabilities that are out there. You're developing those today. You have developed some that we're already using. We need to continue to do that. So that's really key for us. I already talked about resilience, so I won't hit that again. But I do want to just dwell for just 30 seconds on this whole recruiting and training the right workforce. So diversity for us is really important. And I don't say that because I'm a part of this administration. I have been saying it for at least 15 years. And over the last 12 years that I've been calling diversity a mission imperative for us. When I was at the CIA and traveling to different continents around the world, what I found was, I'd go to certain places and I would, even to Africa, and people would say to me, you don't look like you're an African. And I would say, unpack that for me. I wouldn't use that term, but I would say, tell me more about it. And what they would say is, your posture, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, all of that is different. We would spot you and sniff you out in a minute if you were trying to come into this country to be an asset or something like that. Wow, okay. So how do we operate globally? How do we do those things that we need to do? Well, I can't do that with people who look like the majority of people in the intelligence community today. I can't do it. So it's a mission imperative to get those skills in so we can go to those places that we need to go to. We are not spying on Five Eyes countries. We are doing things against other nation states. So that's really important. Plus, we want to look like America. It's just the right thing to do. And there's enough skills that are out there that we need to do that. So I always try to plug that, and I do it not because of some politics, and I am quick to tell members of Congress, I don't care what your party is. I need to be able to operate around the world. And we're going to be able to do that. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is with a diverse and talented workforce. Next slide. So the roles of partners, and this is not exhaustive, but it's something that I do want to just highlight. Last night I was talking with Director Cardillo about partnerships. And I told him I was going to say this because he was poking me in the chest and saying, well, people do not believe in, the government still doesn't believe in working with industry. And I said, that's not true. It's just not true. I believe there are pockets of the government that that still may have the NIH, kind of not invented here syndrome, but that's not us today. We have been working with industry for decades, very closely with industry for decades, and doing some really sensitive things with industry for quite some time. All legal, I might add. But we need to continue to do that, and we need to continue to grow that. And what we need to be is an engaged partner, someone who is working on requirements, but also saying, here's my requirement. Do you have a better way of satisfying it than I am offering up for you to go and try to do if you can do? And if you do, we should take that in and say, yes, yeah, we're willing to listen to you. So we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to leverage all that science and technology that's out there, but work closely with you. We want the private sector to really continue what it has been doing, delivering those capabilities, delivering those technologies, to really, pushing the edge as it pertains to GEOINT and all those sensing things. I think, one of the things that you've heard is that we're getting to the point where everything is a sensor. Everything is a sensor. And so you can imagine looping all these sensors in and connecting them, and the power of being able to do that. Being able to ubiquitously know what's happening around the world with our people, with our systems, with our forces, if you will. Just being able to know what's happening in our installations and bases is really important to us. Being able to know what's happening in our environment, real time. And so we need to be able to do that. And so how do we work with the private sector to help us think through that? Academia, continue to do what you have been doing, leading that research. We need to continue to have the training and have even more GEOINT classes and degrees and master's programs. I saw some when I was here already out there where we are teaching people about GEOINT and what it means. And even the companies, you need to continue to grow workforces that actually have this type of expertise in tradecraft, if you will. International partners, it goes without saying, our international partners are absolutely essential to us. They're helping us build resiliency. They're helping us with operational requirements. They're actually helping us build the GEOINT enterprise of the future. And we really could not do what we're doing without our partners. And then together, how do we federate this and spread it around the world? How do we ensure that this is not just in certain commands around the world? How does it reach every OR so that we can help in every domain around the world? That's where we're driving. Next slide. I think this may be my last slide. So what does the future hold for us? You've given us a lot of thought. And, I really see this exponential growth because of the interconnectivity of all the things that we have, everything that we wear, everything that we do. General Nakasone is just talking about all the devices that people have. When I was at CIA and running technical collection there, one of the things that we talked about 20 years ago was the fact that we were going to face a world that was going to be more interconnected. And that brought with it opportunities. It brought with it also vulnerabilities. We need to think about both. I wear both of those hats. We all need to start wearing both of those hats. What are the opportunities? What are vulnerabilities? We need to bake that into everything that we do. That hits my bullet number 2, that advanced security piece. How do we really look at security differently? And how do you look at it? Just not what you can bring to me, but how can you do that securely, right? How can you do that resiliently? Those are the things that we're going to do. We have to think about how we do this in a dynamic way, if you will. When we talk about multi-ink queuing, it's not new. It really is not new. I remember as a very junior GS back in the 1980s, having models where we were having SIGINT QEMINT, as we called it back in the day. How do we have SIGINT help us find things that don't want to be found? How do we use those two ends to help us find things that are relocatable but strategic, if you will? We're doing that some 35 years ago. A lot of really bright people were looking at that problem. We weren't doing it at scale, we were doing it really surgically. But today, it has to happen, and it is happening at speed, not quite at scale yet, but it needs to happen across everything that we do. And the products that we put together need to be more integrated. I see products today that are integrated, but I still see, in some instances, individual products from all the ends. So how do we better integrate? How do we make what's on the inside look more like what's on the outside? So we want to be able to do that. That's one of the things we're going to focus on. AI, big data, automation, working interoperably, those are things that we're focused on. I won't hit that too much, but I'll come back probably at a later date and talk to you more about it. There are AI initiatives across the Department of Defense being led by the Deputy Secretary of Defense. We are tucking all the things that we have under that, but we're working with you to look at other things. So how do we look at this data that's out there? How do we bring it all together synergistically so that we can have an outcome that's good for the nation, that is good for our partners and allies? And then the last thing that I'll say is that we face what I call the ultimate learning adversary. I've never seen an adversary that is as capable of understanding what we do, assimilating what we do, and replicating it as I have with the pacing challenge that we face today. It's somewhat daunting, but it also gives us opportunities that I won't go into now. You have to understand that that challenge is being faced by not just the Department of Defense, it's being faced by you. So we all are in this together. We're intertwined. There is, to use a long-standing DoD acronym, MAD, but when I talk about MAD, I call it mutually assured dependencies that we have on one another. We are inextricably intertwined with you, right? Inextricably intertwined with you and what you do. And it's a pleasure for me just to be out here. Like I said, just walking through the exhibit hall and talking to people. I wrote down notes. I gave people ideas. I said, hey, think about this. If you do this, you will really be helping not only the Department of Defense, but yourself, right? It's just great stuff that's being done. We need that. We need that creativity. We need to harness it, and we need to bring it to bear for our country. So thank you very much for what you do. Thanks for putting on a great symposium. This has been really fun. I appreciate all that you will do for the nation, and I'm just humbled to be a part of it. So with that, thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Secretary Moultrie, what a great capstone keynote for this day, how well you integrated possibility, need, and outcome. We're going to do a bit of a speed round of the questions. So here's go. I'll try and ask them succinctly, and I know you'll do the same. You sit at the intersection of services, combatant commanders, and the national intelligence system. What are the services and combatant commands clamoring for?
So the services and combatant commands are just integral to what we do. I mean, they're really at the pointy edge of that spear that's helping us understand what the requirements are. And they work very closely with us. The J2s of the services and the combatant commands are telling us, what they see, what they are actually experiencing. And our job is to help them bring what they have and where we can satisfy it via the national system to be able to do that. What we don't want is duplication of effort. So I know that a lot of commands come to you and say, here's something that I need you to do for us, or here's something that we're working on, or some of the services may come to you and say, here's a requirement that I have. What we're trying to do is make sure we're partnering with those services and with those commands to say, there are things that we need to get into the national system, because most of the crises that we face, and even most of the steady state things that we're looking at, are in the cognizance of the Secretary of Defense and the leadership of the Pentagon. We have a tremendous amount of data that we're looking at every day. Some of it just says, here's the situation that's going on here, but it allows the Secretary, when he gets a question, or allows the leadership, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when he gets a question to say, is something happening here? He can say, no, there's nothing happening there. Or if something has happened in a specific area, to say, here's what's going on. So we're trying to get the services and the combatant commands to integrate more with us. I think we're being successful, but we have to prove that we can deliver and satisfy their needs and requirements.
Excellent. DoD has been long a driver of where GEOINT goes, so good to know that that pressure hasn't abated. What's the biggest challenge? You talked about the successes we're having in understanding what's going on in Ukraine and the advantages we have. What's the biggest challenge you are facing right now in projecting future Russian military activity in the region?
In the Ukraine? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Russians are a learning adversary too. So they have watched what the Ukrainians have done. They are actually modifying their game plan. They're learning from all the things that are being thrown against them. Our biggest challenge is going to be, I think, just being able to keep the lines of communications and logistics open to the Ukrainians, understanding how we can continue to support them with the materials that they need, with the data that they need. The Russians are trying to, as I said, sever those lines, but it's absolutely critical, and it's their lifeblood. So we've got to get creative. We've got to find those partners, as the Secretary is over in Europe as we speak, talking with partners on how do we continue to do this and how do we continue to keep the pressure on. But as the Secretary said, the Russians they're going to come out of this weakened. The way that we look at it is if we lose an individual, if we lose a tank, we are weaker for it, if you will. The Russians have lost hundreds of tanks. They've lost thousands of individuals in this crisis. We want to help the Ukrainians win. We will help them win, but we need to continue to have those lines open to them. I think that's our biggest crisis.
Well, Secretary Moultrie, because you are one of my dearest, oldest colleagues and friends, I'm going to say we don't have time for you to answer the question about DCSA and the accelerating the security clearance process. I'm sorry, but I know you'll have time to get to them later. You can comfortably go home, sir, and tell your wife that you had this audience in rapt attention, and she should be much more gentle with you about your future speaking events. Thank you so very much for gracing our stage.